Good morning, guys. Hopefully, you're having a good day. Happy Friday. My wife and I both teach. We're both doing e-learning, and my kids are obviously doing the same. And so, during the summertime, as teachers, my wife and I will regularly need to talk to one another to figure out what day it is, whether it's a Tuesday or a Friday or a weekend or whatever. So, if you're having trouble keeping track of what day it is, I totally understand that. But it is Friday. We are heading into the weekend, and we will be wrapping up chapter 25 today, taking a look at your text questions that you guys have been working with, dealing with the civil rights movement. And so I'll be laying out for you what we will be doing doing today, then talking a little bit about what's going on for next week. For you guys with chapter 25, we'll be wrapping up the whole situation when it comes to civil rights. Coming up today, we'll be taking a look at what's going on with the official civil rights movement that is going to find itself splintering as we move into the late 1960s. And in particular, the two terms that we want to be able to work with are de jure and de facto segregation. And what we're going to find is that in the chapter 25 that you're reading about, will successfully get rid of de jure segregation, which means legal discrimination based on laws, requiring people in the United States to behave in a discriminatory sort of manner. The problem, though, is that when we get done doing that with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, we're still going to have a system that has been built over decades that has set up segregation patterns. And many of you guys will be aware of this. If you think about neighborhoods in Minneapolis, there are neighborhoods like North Minneapolis that, because of the first and second great migrations of African Americans from South to North during World War I and World War II, African Americans moved into those neighborhoods, white people moved out to the suburbs, and we now can see some schools that have larger African American populations than others. And that segregation is still around decades after it was legally required, but it still exists. And the question that we wrestle with nowadays is, should something be done about that? Is that the way that things should be? But we're going to be taking a look first at the big steps that are taken by Lyndon Johnson to try to address that problem. Now, what I'll also be sharing with you today is what's been going on compared to your video with our current news. And so if you've been paying attention to the news, and in particular, if you'd like to get back to normal, this past week has been a pretty momentous one. President Trump, a couple days ago, announced that he really wanted to get back to business as usual starting at the beginning of May. And so he announced, when he was asked about this, he announced that he had the absolute power to tell states that they had to end their shelter-in-place warnings and require them to go back to work. And many people who were interviewing the president at the time pointed out that according to the 10th Amendment, states have the ability to make decisions for themselves when it comes to stuff that is not involved in interstate trade, that is not a federal issue. The president continued to say, though, that he had the power to force the states to change. And if you notice, that's kind of an issue that you've been wrestling with inside the videos and inside of chapter 25, where you had the South insisting that they had states' rights when it came to civil rights, and eventually laws that were created by the president and by Congress to force changes with the South. Now, when it comes to things like business, though, and running your business inside of a state during a pandemic, the president made comments that he had the power to force states to reopen. And after a lot of pushback, he came out with his recommendations yesterday. And so to kind of give you a synopsis of what was going on with his recommendations, President Trump has now backed off on the idea that he can force states to go back to work. And his plans are now very simple. He claims that he wants to have 3 different tiers or categories of states. And in order to move from the lowest tier, the one that's most in danger for coronavirus, to the most open that has now given up their restrictions, they say that you need to have 14 days in a row where you see the number of coronavirus cases in your state dropping. And at that point, they'll move you to a different level of quarantine or shelter in place, or at least that's the recommendation that the federal government is making. Each state is going to be allowed to make their own decisions. What that means is we are out of school until May 4th at least. And then according to the federal government's recommendations, we would need to see 14 days of our coronavirus incidents declining. And what we're seeing currently is in some parts of the country, they've now been hit by their peak and they're now starting to decline. There are some parts of the country, though, that have not hit their peak yet. And in particular, what's really hard about deciding whether to stay closed or reopen is we still have tested less than 1% of the entire American population, and we don't have the testing capability to find out who's had coronavirus and who has not. So I've got a number of friends of mine who are pretty certain that they had coronavirus because they had heavy pneumonia in January. They got really horribly sick. Nobody really knew what was going on. They haven't been officially tested, but the symptoms are leading them to believe that they might have been sick. Many doctors are saying that until we actually have some sort of testing to find out who's been sick and who's not, it's a little bit dangerous to start going back to work, especially since they don't think we're going to have a vaccine happening for possibly weeks, months, or maybe even over a year. So that's the situation that we have right now. A lot of people, myself included, would like to get back to work. I really miss seeing you guys in person. Doing this sort of teaching is not my ideal, but it's better than nothing. And so what we'll be doing today is we're going to be taking a look at the third and final ed puzzle for the civil rights video that I've been sharing with you, and we'll be doing that in conjunction with chapter 25. You can ask any questions over in the chat area or unmute your microphone if you would like to do that. But let me show you what you're doing for today, and then on Monday when we get back together, we are going to be reviewing what does civil rights look like nowadays, what's going on with the situation in the United States, and in particular, we'll take a look at what happened after Martin Luther King's assassination when it comes to the idea of how the United States then tried to wrestle with the idea of getting rid of legal segregation, but still having racial issues that you and I both are aware are still taking place here in the United States. So let me show you, first of all, your Google document for today. And so bringing you right back to here. Please remember to, again, fill out the attendance form every single day so that your attendance is being recorded the way that it should. When you are doing this ed puzzle, please do part 3 today and have your chapter 25 text questions with you. And please make sure you watch all the way to completion. I look to see if you've recorded 100% of the viewing of the video to give you credit for the work that you're doing. This is due by the time class starts on Monday. So by 10 a.m. on Monday, I would like you to have this video watched. And then at that time, we'll be able to talk about current civil rights and what's going on in today's world. The other thing I'd like to highlight for you is you are now moving into history that is modern day history. And in particular, the civil rights leaders that you're studying, many of them are in your grandparents' age currently. That generation is starting to pass on, sadly, but they're still around. And many of the people who harbored racist viewpoints also are still around nowadays. And so as we take a look at the world that you're in, there are a lot of people who will argue that once we passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, things were done, racism went away. We shouldn't talk about racial issues that are happening inside the United States. But a few years ago, you saw the Black Lives Matter movement get started when many African Americans were protesting about police intimidation, scrutiny, brutality. And so their protests included doing things like kneeling down during the national anthem, during our sporting events. And it very much showed that while some people would like to move on, other people still recognize that we have issues that have not been addressed. The reason why I bring that up is while you're watching these documentaries, I'd like you to notice this guy. This is John Lewis. John Lewis is a guy who you're seeing inside the video. He is somebody, and let me bring you to his biography. Shoot. He is somebody who you're seeing quite often inside the video. And let me show you a picture of him because I think you'll recognize him as a member of SNCC, especially during the sit-ins. And so this is John Lewis as he looks nowadays. This is John Lewis as a kid, though. So when you see John Lewis, he is somebody who is going to be involved in the different protests that are taking place. As a member of SNCC, he will be involved in what's known as Bloody Sunday, walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And in fact, he just redid that march for the 55th anniversary that we just had this past year of making that walk across the bridge, where you'll see him getting brutalized quite a bit by the police. He is now a member of Congress. One of the things that he likes to do is if there are protests that are taking place, he is somebody who will oftentimes chime in with protests that are happening And oftentimes he will support nonviolent civilian protests in the manner that Martin Luther King used to use. And if you are somebody who is on Twitter, his hashtag that he likes to use with that is the hashtag of good trouble, where he argues that by employing Martin Luther King's techniques, whether it is African American protests for civil rights or in the modern times, you have a number of different people who are involved in protest movements showing civil disobedience, trying to make change in the world. He is a supporter of all of those different trends, and it's kind of cool to see a guy from the generations previous still engaged in trying to agitate in that sort of way, because he believes that that's the way you can make change happen. The thing I also want to highlight for you as you watch today is the big problem that civil rights leaders have, where many civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King included, are going to be asked, why is he being a troublemaker? In the letter from a Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King got sent to jail in Birmingham, and many other pastors sent him a message saying, look, you're making people mad, you're stirring things up. And Martin Luther King's response was, if you don't stir things up, the status quo is never going to change. And he also was arguing that if he was making people uncomfortable, but he was doing so because there were people who were being persecuted and discriminated against, that's actually what Thomas Jefferson encouraged people to do in the Declaration of Independence if you were truly patriotic. Because according to the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. They have certain inalienable rights. Those rights are supposed to be life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And Martin Luther King's insistence was, if you're being attacked by dogs, or if you're being hit by fire hoses, by police officers, strictly because you are marching through a park, that is not actually protecting your rights. That is not just, and it should be protested against and changed, not just by African Americans, but by all Americans, because if those rights are being taken away for one group of people, they could be taken away for a whole bunch of other people too. So that's what you'll be seeing today. You're going to be seeing Lyndon Johnson, who is going to become the most influential president when it comes to civil rights, because he is going to be the first president since the time of Lincoln to really advocate for a major shift in the way that African Americans are treated inside of our society. And his actions will get rid of de jure segregation, segregation by law, but we still have a country that has issues when it comes to race and tolerance and discrimination and segregation, which again, we'll focus on Monday. So I'm taking a look at the chat right now, and I don't see any questions currently, but I check my email throughout the course of the day. I've been updating your grades as we've gone through the past week, so hopefully your grades look more complete, but I'll still be working on that over the course of this weekend. And if you find that you're having any sorts of problems with like the ed puzzles and work completion, whatever, please reach out to me and let me know so that I can help you out with that. But my hope is that the work that I'm giving to you is doable. Hopefully it's not too much. And hopefully it's understandable to actually help you understand the content. It's not perfect. It's not what we would do in class, but hopefully you're understanding the reading better with the way that I'm breaking stuff up for you. If you do not have any questions, I'm going to turn you loose. Have a nice weekend and especially enjoy the weather, which is supposed to get warmer. Make sure, again, you check off the attendance that you're good for that. And again, let me help you out in any way so that hopefully this experience is going well for you. I miss seeing you guys in person, and I'm hoping we get a chance to see each other soon. But stay safe and stay healthy, okay? Have a great day, guys.